My wife was preparing for a date with another man and told me to accept it. Before we continue with the story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly makes a difference and helps us grow. Now let's get back to the story. The door slammed shut behind Amy as she walked down the dimly lit hallway, the sound of her heels echoing sharply on the polished wooden floor. A coldness filled the air, not from the outside breeze, but from the tension that hung heavy between her and Nathan. The dim light cast long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with each flicker. He stood by the door, arms crossed, his gaze cold and unyielding, the veins in his neck prominent with suppressed emotion. "Amy, you really think you can just walk away from all of this?" Nathan's voice broke the silence, each word tinged with frustration. His eyes bore into her, searching for any sign of uncertainty, but finding none. Amy glanced at him through the soft reflection of the mirror, her lips curling into a detached smile as she casually touched up her lipstick, not breaking stride. Her reflection revealed a woman composed, determined, her resolve unshakable. "Nathan, we've had this conversation. I'm leaving, and there's nothing you can do to stop me," she replied, her voice firm with no trace of remorse or doubt. She smoothed the fabric of her dress, feeling the luxurious silk glide against her skin, a stark contrast to the roughness of their exchange. Nathan moved closer, his fists clenching by his sides, the tension in his body palpable. The creak of the floorboards under his weight seemed to echo the heaviness in the air. "And you're okay with me just standing here while you run off with that guy? Julian, right?" he asked, his voice edged with anger, his eyes narrowing as he mentioned the name that had become a wedge between them. "Yes, Julian. And yes, I'm fine with it because you don't have the courage to walk away. We both know what happens if you try." Amy's gaze never wavered as she adjusted her dress, the defiant angle of her chin a silent testament to her determination. Nathan's jaw clenched tighter, the muscles working under his skin as he struggled to maintain control. "You think I'm afraid of you, Amy? You think I won't file those divorce papers?" His voice was a low growl, laced with a mixture of defiance and desperation. Her laugh rang out, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You won't," she said, her tone cold, her eyes meeting his in a challenge. "Because you know I'll take everything. Our house, the kids, everything. You'll be the one left paying while I get to move on. And you won't even get to see Nathan and Erica without paying for the privilege." Her words were like daggers, each one aimed at the vulnerabilities she knew so well. Nathan's breath caught, but he fought to keep his voice steady, his mind racing with images of the life they had built together now crumbling before him. "And what about them? How do you think they'll feel when they find out, when they realize you destroy their lives for some affair?" His voice cracked slightly, the weight of his words settling between them, heavy with the implications of their choices. The silence that followed was thick, the only sound the distant hum of city life beyond their walls, a world that continued turning even as theirs threatened to fall apart. Amy remained unmoved, her face a mask of indifference, her eyes betraying no emotion as she looked at Nathan. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable between them. Ethan's tone hardened. "Nathan, don't try to pretend this is about morality," Amy said, her voice calm and unwavering, each word measured with precision. Her tone was steady, a contrast to the charged atmosphere. "You can guilt-trip me all you want, but I know how this goes. You'll accept it because you have no other choice. And when I get back tonight, we'll have a grown-up conversation about how this is going to work." She turned to leave, her movements deliberate, but Nathan's voice stopped her, a note of desperation woven into his words. "If you walk out that door, don't expect me to still be here when you get back, Amy." She paused for a moment, a fleeting hesitation before casting a smirk over her shoulder, her confidence unshaken. "Oh, Nathan, you'll be here. You're too weak to leave." With that final remark, she exited, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving Nathan alone in the heavy silence of the room. The door shut behind her with a definitive click, marking her departure. As the echoes faded, something shifted in Nathan's eyes, a newfound resolve. He stood there, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders, before reaching into his pocket. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone, staring at it for a moment as if steeling himself for what he was about to do, and dialed a number he never thought he'd call again. The phone rang, each tone stretching the seconds into an eternity, before a familiar voice answered, gravelly and direct, a voice that carried memories of another time. "Nathan, long time, no talk." "Yeah, Ethan, it's been a while. Listen, I need your help, and I'm not asking as a friend. I'm asking as someone who's got no other options. Nathan's voice was urgent, each word weighed down with frustration and a hint of desperation. There was a brief pause on the other end, a silence that spoke volumes. Ethan wasn't the type to get involved unless things were serious, and Nathan knew this. What happened? Ethan's voice was cautious yet concerned. Nathan looked around the empty living room, the quiet of the house pressing in on him, the memories of happier times haunting the space. Amy's destroying everything. She's got some guy now, Julian. I don't care about him, but she's threatening to take the kids, use them against me. I need to protect them, Ethan. I can't let her ruin their lives just because she's lost her mind. His voice cracked slightly with the weight of his fears, each word a plea for help, as he stood in the solitude of the room, hoping for a lifeline. You know what you're asking me to do, right? You remember what happened last time we got involved in something like this. Nathan spoke with a hint of apprehension in his voice, the weight of past mistakes pressing down on him. Nathan inhaled deeply, trying to calm himself. His mind flickered with memories, those long, torturous nights he'd rather forget, faces he wished he could erase from his mind. The tension in his shoulders was a constant reminder of the chaos that once consumed him. But this situation was different. He reassured himself. I know, but I'm not asking for anything illegal. I just need help keeping tabs on her. I need to know who she's talking to, what she's planning. Do you still have those contacts? His voice was steady, but his heart raced with the gravity of the request. Yeah, but this could get really complicated, Ethan replied, his voice laced with caution. The hesitation in his tone suggested he was well aware of the potential fallout. If Amy finds out, Ethan warned, the unspoken consequences hanging heavily in the air. She won't, and even if she does, I don't care anymore. She crossed a line tonight, Ethan. I'm done playing nice. Nathan's voice cracked with frustration, his patience running thin. He was tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of being walked all over. This time, things were going to change, and he was determined to make it happen. Ethan sighed, a resigned chuckle escaping him. All right, Nathan, I'm in. I'll make some calls. Get the old crew together. But once we start, there's no turning back. You sure about this? Ethan's words were a final checkpoint, a last opportunity to reconsider the path they were about to embark on. Nathan's grip tightened around the phone, his decision final and unwavering. Believe me, I'm ready. At the same time, Amy entered the brightly lit lounge where Julian was already waiting. The atmosphere was lively, with the smell of expensive liquor and the faint scent of perfume mingling in the air. Dressed in a leather jacket with a relaxed grin, he looked every bit the part of someone who thrived in such settings. The music pulsed around them, a rhythmic beat that seemed to sync with the buzz of conversation filling the space. As soon as Julian spotted Amy, he raised his glass with a confident nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. Hey, beautiful, you actually showed up? He teased, a playful grin on his face as he leaned in while she slid into the seat beside him at the dimly lit bar. The place was buzzing with lively chatter and the clink of glasses. I thought for sure you'd bail at the last minute. Amy smiled, a flirtatious gleam in her eyes, resting her hand casually on his arm. Her perfume subtly mingled with the ambient aroma of coffee and freshly baked pastries from the cafe next door. Not a chance. I'm done with Nathan trying to control me. I'm ready for someone real, someone who doesn't hold me back, she declared, her voice carrying a hint of defiance. Julian smirked, though a spark of curiosity flickered in his eyes. The low hum of the jazz band playing in the corner added an intimate backdrop to their conversation. Yeah, but you really think Nathan's going to let this go? Most guys would fight back if their wife started seeing someone else while they're still living together, he replied, his voice lowering somewhat beneath the music. Amy chuckled, but it had a sharpness to it, almost like a dagger cloaked in velvet. He's harmless. Trust me. He likes to talk tough, but in the end, he'll do nothing. He's too predictable, she said with a casual wave of her hand, dismissing the thought like a wisp of smoke. Julian raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping into his expression. He had seen enough in his life to know that things were rarely as simple as they seemed. Are you sure about this? It's not like you're exactly swimming in cash without him, he pointed out, running a hand through his hair thoughtfully. Amy leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear as a sly smile played on her lips. That's why I've got a plan. Stick with me and we'll be living the good life in no time, she whispered, her words laced with a promise of adventure and risk. Julian couldn't resist the confidence in her voice, and with a shrug, he tapped his glass against hers. Yet even as they clinked glasses, a nagging feeling settled in his gut. The bar's shadows seemed to deepen around them, adding to his unease. Amy might think Nathan was all talk, but Julian knew better than to underestimate anyone. Nathan might not seem dangerous, but Julian had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Something about the situation didn't feel right. Meanwhile, back at the house, Nathan was already taking action. The old house creaked in the wind, a testament to years of standing against the elements. He made his way down to the basement, where cobwebs clung to the corners and an old metal lockbox was tucked away under a pile of forgotten tools. The air was musty, filled with the scent of rust and old memories. Inside, he found a stack of papers, some small electronics, and a burner phone. It felt like stepping into a past he had promised to leave behind, a life filled with shadows and secrets. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and Nathan knew he couldn't afford to wait any longer. He dialed a number on the burner phone, taking a deep breath as he listened to the rings before a familiar voice picked up. "Nathan, what's going on?" It was Sebastian, an old contact who had transitioned from the shadows into a legitimate role as a security specialist. She raised an eyebrow, but Nathan saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "You think you can intimidate me, Nathan? With what? You've got nothing on me." "Sebastian, I need some tech. Something to track her phone, maybe a few trackers. Just enough to keep an eye on Amy and who she's talking to," Nathan stated firmly, his voice steady and devoid of doubt, as if he had rehearsed this conversation in his mind 100 times. Sebastian let out a dry chuckle, the sound of it crackling through the phone line. "Still into the shadowy stuff, huh? All right, I'll send you a package. You should have it by morning. Just make sure you're careful with it." "Thanks. And Sebastian, don't tell anyone, at least not yet," Nathan added, his tone softening slightly. The gravity of the situation weighed on him, but he knew it was a risk he had to take. "You got it, man. Just don't go getting yourself tangled up too much," Sebastian advised. As Nathan ended the call, an unfamiliar sense of calm washed over him. For the first time in what felt like months, he felt as though he had regained some control over his life. Whatever Amy thought she had over him, she was about to find out how wrong she was. When Amy finally returned home, the clock had already ticked past 3:00 a.m. The house was cloaked in the quiet of the night, yet the living room lights were on, casting a warm glow. She was tipsy from her night out, a contented smile still lingering on her lips from the evening's revelry. But as soon as she stepped inside, a chill ran down her spine, a subtle sense of unease. Nathan was sitting in the armchair, his silhouette casting a long shadow in the soft light, a stark contrast against the otherwise welcoming ambience of the room. "Well, look who finally decided to come home," he said, his voice strangely nonchalant, almost too casual for the tension that hung in the air. Amy halted in her tracks, her smile faltering as she absorbed his words. "Nathan, don't start this," she pleaded, sensing the storm brewing. "I'm not starting anything," he replied, standing up slowly as if gathering his resolve. "I just want you to understand how this is going to unfold." He met her gaze with unwavering eyes, unflinching and resolute. "You thought I'd just let you do whatever you want? You were wrong. I'm done being your doormat." The words hung between them like a heavy curtain, signaling a shift in their dynamic, one that Amy hadn't anticipated. Nathan chuckled darkly, his laugh void of any humor, a chilling sound that resonated in the room. "Is that really what you think?" he asked, his voice low and filled with a dangerous edge. "Let's just say, I have people who are much better at uncovering the truth than you realize, and I won't let you drag our kids into this mess." After securing the devices, Nathan made his way back to the house and descended to the basement, where he set up his makeshift operation. He powered up the software, connected the devices, and was immediately met with the crackling of static, which shifted into the clear sound of Amy's phone conversations. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever he might uncover. Amy's expression shifted, her composed demeanor cracking as anger flashed in her eyes, only to be quickly replaced by something else, fear. She attempted to mask it with a sharp, dismissive laugh, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You think your little friends are going to change anything? I'll still get the house, the money, everything. You know how the system works?" Nathan took a deliberate step closer, his jaw tightening with determination. "We'll see about that," he replied, his words heavy with resolve, "because I'm not backing down without a fight." For a brief moment, the air between them crackled with tension, thick and electric, as if the very molecules in the room were charged with their animosity. Neither moved, both locked in a dangerous game where the stakes had never been higher. But this time, Nathan wasn't going to be the one to retreat. Amy was about to learn just how far he was willing to go to protect everything that mattered to him, the stakes personal and profound. As the night stretched on, Nathan remained awake, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and resolve. He pored over old contacts, reaching out to establish secure channels with Ethan and Sebastian, two of his most trusted allies. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, casting a pale glow across his weary face, a plain, unmarked package appeared at his door. Inside, he found a few compact gadgets, a couple of listening bugs, a discrete tracker, and a drive containing custom software Sebastian had tailored specifically to his needs. There was no time to waste. With Amy still asleep upstairs, her breathing soft and rhythmic, Nathan moved swiftly. He quickly slipped outside, the cool morning air sharp against his skin, and deftly placed the tracker under her car's bumper, tucking it securely out of sight. Back inside, he carefully placed a bug in her purse, just a little extra insurance to capture any conversations she thought were private. The pieces were in motion, and Nathan was ready to play his hand. Meanwhile, Amy's morning was off to a rough start. She had woken up feeling uneasy, the kind of unease that settled deep in her bones and refused to shake off, no matter how she tried to brush it away. Nathan's sudden change in behavior unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, but she brushed it off as best as she could, attributing it to the stress of juggling family and work life. As she hurriedly prepared breakfast, she couldn't help but replay their recent conversations in her mind, searching for clues to his newfound confidence. Nathan's blood boiled, but he tamped down the anger, reminding himself that he needed to think ahead. This time, Amy wouldn't see him coming. She dropped the kids at school, kissed them goodbye like everything was fine, and then hurried to meet Julian at the cozy cafe near his office, a familiar and oddly comforting place despite the tension in her mind. The cafe was bustling with the morning rush, steam rising from cups and conversations overlapping in a gentle hum. When she arrived, Julian was already there, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. He noticed the tension in her eyes as she sat down, her movements almost mechanical. "Bad morning?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, his voice a comforting anchor in her stormy thoughts. Amy forced a smile, pushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "It's Nathan. He's acting different, more sure of himself. It's like he knows something I don't," she confided, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking it aloud would give the words more power. Julian leaned in, lowering his voice and his demeanor turning serious. "Maybe he does. You sure he hasn't figured out what you've been up to?" His words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Amy dismissed his concern with a wave of her hand, though her heart raced at the thought. "He's just trying to act tough. He doesn't have the guts to actually do anything," she replied, though a flicker of doubt crossed her face, an uninvited guest she struggled to ignore. Julian noticed it immediately, his eyes sharp as he observed her, recognizing the vulnerability beneath her confident facade. "Maybe we should tread carefully," he suggested, his voice low, carrying a note of caution. "Don't want him getting too suspicious." Amy rolled her eyes, but her smile seemed forced, a crack in her usual confidence that Julian was quick to perceive. "Relax, Trev. I've got it all under control," she asserted, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Back in the basement, Nathan clenched his jaw, hearing every word with growing intensity. The basement had always been his sanctuary, a place of solitude and reflection, but now it served as a vantage point, a window into Amy's secretive world. His mind was racing, but he fought to keep his focus, knowing that any rash action might alert Amy to his awareness. So he let the conversation play out, taking note of every detail, every inflection, every unspoken word. What he heard only fueled his suspicion. Julian wasn't just some casual fling. He was an active participant in Amy's plans. The mention of finances, the subtle hints at erasing Nathan completely from the picture, echoed in his mind. Each revelation was a puzzle piece falling into place, forming a picture he wished he could unsee. The next evening, Nathan dialed Ethan's number, his voice strained with urgency as he paced the length of his small, cluttered living room. "She's up to something big, Ethan. She's got Julian involved, and they're making plans to drain me dry. They're even looking into offshore accounts to hide their tracks." Ethan looked over the cabin, arms crossed. "Nice place. How long are you planning to keep them here?" Ethan whistled low, clearly alarmed. "That's serious. You need to counter this before she locks you out of everything. You can't afford to be passive now." "I need you to help me with something more direct," Nathan replied, glancing at the clock anxiously. "We need to put the pressure on." Make her second-guess her next move. She's always been one step ahead, and I can't let that continue. Ethan hesitated for a moment, considering the implications. What are you thinking? Nathan glanced at an old map pinned to the basement wall, a reminder of a different time, a different life when they were young and reckless. You remember that safe house outside of town? The one we used when things got too hot overseas? It's secluded enough, and no one would think to look there. Yeah, I remember. You planning to stash the kids there? It's risky, but it might be the safest option. Nathan nodded, though Ethan couldn't see it over the phone. For a few days until I figure out my next move. I don't trust her, and I definitely don't trust Julian to stay out of our business. This isn't just about me anymore. I need to protect Nathan and Erica. Ethan was silent for a moment before he spoke, his tone serious and laden with unspoken concerns. All right, Nathan, I'll set things up, but you better be ready for what's coming. Once you start down this road, there's no turning back. Nathan's voice grew firm, his resolve hardening. I'm ready, and I'm not letting Amy get away with this. She's crossed a line, and I have to do whatever it takes to protect my family. 2 days later, the plan was set in motion with the precision of a military operation. Nathan picked up Nathan and Erica from school early, explaining to the principal that there was a family emergency that required their immediate attention. He packed them into the SUV, forcing a cheerful smile as he mentioned a surprise adventure. By the time they arrived at the safe house, a remote cabin deep in the woods, shrouded in the shadows of towering pines. It was well after dark. The kids, unaware of the underlying tension that Nathan carried with him, were thrilled, thinking they were going on a fun trip. Nathan played along, setting up a movie for them with an old projector while he stepped outside to meet Ethan, who had arrived with a small, trusted team ready to assist in any way necessary. Just long enough to get enough on Amy. I want her to feel what it's like to be out of control, Nathan replied, his expression hardening into a mask of determination. The moonlight cast a pale glow on his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. She thinks she can tear our lives apart, but I'm not going to let her. Ethan nodded, though his face was tight with concern. Lines of worry etched across his forehead. You sure this is the right move? Things could escalate quickly, he cautioned, glancing uneasily at the towering trees that surrounded them. Nathan took a long, steadying breath, his gaze fixed on the pitch-black forest that seemed to stretch endlessly before them. It's already escalated, Ethan. I'm just trying to make it through without losing everything, he admitted, his voice a mix of resolve and underlying anxiety. Meanwhile, Amy was in the kitchen, pacing back and forth with a growing sense of unease. Her anxiety surged as she scrolled through her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. It was almost 10 p.m. and still no word from Nathan. The kids hadn't come home from school, and his car was nowhere to be seen in the driveway, leaving an eerie emptiness. She tried calling his phone again, but each attempt went straight to voicemail, amplifying her sense of dread. A cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Desperate for some support, she called her mother, her voice laced with panic and urgency. Mom, something's wrong. Nathan took the kids and he's not answering my calls, she blurted out, her voice cracking under the weight of her worry. Her mother's voice crackled through the line, full of concern and disbelief. What do you mean? He took them? Are you sure he's not just messing with you? She asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Amy's jaw clenched as frustration mingled with her fear. I don't know, but he's never done anything like this before. I have no idea where he is, and I can't lose Nathan and Erica like this, she insisted, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mother hesitated, then spoke softly, the worry in her voice matched by the gravity of her words. You might need to consider calling the police, dear. If he's really taken them. Amy's throat tightened, her resolve wavering. She wasn't ready for that step, not yet. Involving the authorities would mean losing control, and she couldn't afford that. Not when she still had a plan in place, a faint hope that she could resolve this on her own terms. No, she answered quickly, cutting her mother off. Not yet. I'll handle this. I just need to find out where he's keeping them, she declared, clinging to the belief that she could still regain control, her determination as fierce as her fear. After ending the call, Amy grabbed her purse and rushed to the door, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. As she stepped outside into the crisp evening air, she didn't notice the shadow moving stealthily across the street, one of Ethan's men keeping a watchful eye on her every move, blending perfectly into the dimly lit surroundings. What's wrong? Julian asked, noticing the shift in her behavior. That same night, Nathan sat on the cabin's porch, the faint glow of the moonlight casting shadows on his face, phone pressed to his ear. The sound of crickets filled the silence as Sebastian picked up after the second ring. "Did you get anything from the bug?" Nathan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, low and rough. "Oh, I got more than enough," Sebastian replied, a dark laugh in his tone echoing through the line. "Amy's freaking out trying to find you. She's called that Julian guy 3 times, and she's seriously considering calling the cops." Nathan's lips curled into a grim smile as he nodded to himself, satisfaction evident in his eyes. "Good. Keep an eye on her. If she does anything, I want to know immediately." "You got it, but Nathan, be careful. If you push too hard, she'll push back," Sebastian warned, his voice tinged with concern. Nathan's eyes gleamed in the dark, a spark of determination burning within them. "Let her. This time, I'm ready for anything she throws my way." The next day, Amy met Julian at a rundown bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where stories were whispered and secrets were kept. Her face was tense, her movements frantic as she navigated through the dimly lit room. She grabbed his arm, her voice full of urgency, her grip like a vice. "Nathan's lost it, Julian. He's taken the kids, and I can't track him down. We need to get them back, or everything we've worked for will fall apart," she said, her eyes wide with desperation. Julian's expression hardened as he led her to a secluded booth, away from prying eyes and curious ears. "We'll figure this out, but you need to stay calm. If you panic, you're going to mess everything up," he advised, his voice firm but reassuring. Amy bit her lip, her eyes flashing with frustration, her heart pounding in her chest. "We don't have time to stay calm. We need to find them before he makes a move," Amy said, her voice laced with urgency. But as she spoke, she caught sight of something. A tiny black bug on the edge of her purse, barely noticeable against the fabric, yet glaringly obvious to her now. Her heart skipped a beat, fear coursing through her veins. Quickly, she turned away from Julian, pretending to search through her bag, trying to keep her composure. Amy managed a strained smile as she glanced around the room. "Nothing, just need to use the restroom," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. She slipped away, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. Inside the dimly lit bathroom, she locked herself in a stall, her breathing quickening as she peeled the tiny bug off her purse and crushed it beneath her heel, the sound barely audible over the buzzing of the overhead light. A dark determination filled her eyes as she muttered under her breath. "So, Nathan, you're playing dirty now, huh? Fine, let's see how you like it when I start fighting back." Nathan shook his head, his gaze fixed on the dense forest. "No, but she doesn't know what we've got planned. I'm going to show her just how far she's pushed me." Amy stormed out of the bar, her thoughts spinning wildly like a whirlwind. She had underestimated Nathan, and now she felt cornered, like a prey trapped by its hunter. But she wasn't about to back down. Her heart pounded fiercely, driving her actions as she called Julian immediately, ordering him to meet her at the house. They needed to figure out their next move, and fast. The stakes were higher than ever, and Amy knew time was of the essence. An hour later, Julian arrived, his footsteps echoing in the hallway as he entered the tension-filled living room. The atmosphere was thick, almost tangible, with Amy's fury simmering beneath the surface, and Julian seemed uncertain, unsure of how far things would escalate. They paced back and forth in the dimly lit living room, shadows dancing on the walls as Amy vented her frustration about Nathan's sudden actions. "We need to find him, Julian. If he thinks he can just disappear with the kids, he's sorely mistaken," she snarled, her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. Julian raised his hands in a calming gesture, trying to inject some reason into the heated discussion. Okay, let's take a step back. We don't want to make a rash move. Maybe we should dig into his finances, see if he's made any big withdrawals or rented somewhere. I know a guy who could help track his movements." Amy's eyes glimmered with a renewed sense of purpose, a fire rekindled within. "Do it. Whatever it takes, just find them," she insisted, her voice firm and unwavering. Meanwhile, at the secluded cabin, Nathan's phone buzzed with an alert from Sebastian, the subtle vibration breaking the silence. Amy had found the bug, but she wasn't backing down. Nathan's jaw tightened, tension settling across his features. It was only a matter of time before she would escalate things even further. He glanced over at the kids, their laughter and chatter filling the cabin as they happily played with board games that Ethan had thoughtfully brought for them. He forced a smile, though it felt like a flimsy facade, then stepped outside to think amidst the crisp evening air. Ethan joined Nathan on the porch, handing him a steaming cup of coffee, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. "She's not going to back off, is she?" Ethan asked, concern etching his voice as he looked out into the distance. Ethan took a contemplative sip of his coffee and glanced over at Nathan, concern etched across his brow. "You sure you're ready for this? For whatever happens next?" His voice held a note of seriousness that matched the gravity of the situation. Nathan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "After everything you've done, you honestly think I'll just hand them over and let you walk away?" "No, Amy. It's done. I filed for full custody. You won't see them again." Nathan turned his gaze toward the small, rustic cabin, where the joyous sounds of the children's laughter floated through the open window like a soft melody. The sight was bittersweet, a reminder of what he was fighting for. "I have to be for them," he replied, his voice tinged with both determination and vulnerability. Amy and Julian's relentless search eventually led them to a renowned private investigator, reputed for his expertise in tracking down individuals who preferred to remain hidden. Despite their best efforts, Nathan always stayed one step ahead, thanks to the timely information Ethan's well-connected team provided. When Amy discreetly arranged a meeting with a high-profile lawyer to discuss filing an emergency custody order, Nathan was already on top of things, keeping a watchful eye from across the street, diligently recording every move. He sent the incriminating footage to Sebastian, who swiftly infiltrated Julian's financial accounts. Within a matter of hours, Nathan had gathered everything he needed: irrefutable proof of shady transactions and incriminating emails between Amy and Julian that outlined their plan to systematically exclude him from his children's lives. Nathan composed a message and forwarded the damaging files to Amy's phone, accompanied by a blunt message. "You want to play dirty? Here's my hand." Amy froze at the sight of the message, her pulse quickening with a mix of fear and disbelief. As she opened the files, her face blanched, realizing the extent of Nathan's knowledge. The weight of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks, and she turned to Julian, her hands trembling slightly. "He knows everything. He's got proof. He's going to destroy us," she whispered, panic evident in her voice. Julian's expression hardened, his anger towards the situation, and perhaps Amy palpable in the tense silence that followed. "You dragged me into this, Amy. If you'd kept it together, we wouldn't be in this mess," he snapped, frustration lacing his words. Back at the cabin, Nathan's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Amy. He answered it, his voice icy and controlled. "I see you got my message." Amy's voice, trembling with barely contained rage, came through the line. "Nathan, you can't do this. We can work something out. Just give me back the kids and we'll go our separate ways." "You don't need to keep going down this path," she pleaded, her desperation evident. Amy's voice quivered with a mix of anger and desperation, her eyes flashing with emotion. "You really think I'll just let that happen?" The room seemed to shrink under the weight of the confrontation, the echoes of her words lingering in the air. Nathan's response was cold and certain, his expression unwavering. "You don't have a choice. I have everything. Proof of the money, the lies, the affairs." His voice was steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'm not the one who's going to lose here." The conversation ended abruptly as he terminated the call, tossing the phone aside with a sense of finality. The rain started to patter against the windows of the cabin, a fitting backdrop to the storm brewing between them. Inside, the children were blissfully unaware, their laughter and playfulness a stark contrast to the adult turmoil unfolding outside. Nathan, determined to shield them from the chaos, went to them, pulling them into his arms with a reassuring smile. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where he held all the cards and intended to protect his family at all costs. So days later, Nathan received the verdict he'd been anxiously awaiting. The court had granted him temporary custody while they investigated Amy's actions. A wave of relief washed over him, a feeling that was foreign yet welcome. He knew, however, that this battle was far from over, and he steeled himself for what was yet to come. Amy, desperate and realizing the gravity of what she was about to lose, made one final, frantic attempt to regain control. She called the police, accusing Nathan of kidnapping the children. Her voice, filled with urgency and panic, conveyed the depth of her desperation. But by the time the officers arrived at the quaint cabin nestled in the woods, Nathan was prepared. He presented the legal documents with confidence, each paper a testament to his right to have the children with him. Amy's accusations crumbled under the weight of his evidence, her once formidable facade breaking apart. The officers, after a brief but thorough examination, left with a firm warning to her, advising her to stay away. Amy stood just outside the woods, her eyes burning with anger and defeat as she watched Nathan guide the children back into the warm embrace of the cabin. She was too late. Her manipulation had failed, and now she had nothing left. Only the wreckage of her own choices, scattered like leaves in the wind. Julian, who had been a silent companion through much of this ordeal, unwilling to be dragged further into her collapsing world, quietly disappeared from town without a word. He had no intention of sticking around for the aftermath, leaving Amy to face the consequences on her own. Months passed, and Nathan and the kids settled into a fresh start. The echoes of the past lingered like a distant melody, but it no longer held sway over their lives. Nathan had never wanted this fight, but he had fought it for the right reasons, for his children and their future. As he watched them play joyfully in the sun-drenched yard of their new home, their laughter ringing through the air like a sweet song, he knew that every moment of struggle had been worth it. Amy, however, was left with a future she hadn't anticipated, one devoid of the power and control she once believed she had, forced to confront the fallout of her choices. Each day was a reminder of her missteps, a chance to reflect on the life she had crafted and lost. While she may have lost the battle she initiated, Nathan would always remember the cost of their decisions, every wound and every scar. For the first time, he didn't look back, his gaze firmly fixed on a future filled with promise and peace. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and comment. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next video.